This video is about interrupts. So an interrupt is something that a processor, um, a feature of a processor that allows you to interrupt the processor from whatever it happens to be doing at the time in order to do some critical event. All right, now, there are two pins on the Arduino that are capable of handling interrupts, pin 2 and pin 3. The interrupt from pin 2 is called interrupt 0. The one on pin 3 is called interrupt 1. Okay, we've got a little circuit here, and I've got a push button switch. The push button switch is wired with using the internal pull-up resistor, and as you can see, it's connected to pin 2. So the way this is going to work is that when this button is pushed, what that's going to do is it's going to generate an interrupt. And this particular little program is really just to demonstrate interrupts, but what it's going to do is to turn on the LED the first time it gets the button gets pushed, and then the next time it's going to turn the LED off. Now, we've used push button switches before, and basically we wrote the code so that the code would monitor or poll the port. So we'd have a statement in there that was a digital read, and if the button was pushed, then we would do something like maybe turn on an LED or do something else. But there are instances when the processor might be doing something very time-consuming, and there is no time in the program in order to monitor or poll that port. And so as a result, if you push the switch, it's likely that the program is going to miss it, and you're not going to be able to utilize the switch the way you would like. So the interrupt allows you to monitor that switch, or not really monitor the switch. When you're pressing the button, you are really interrupting the processor, and you can require then that the processor execute what's called an interrupt service routine. Okay, let's take a look at the code here. So, first of all, I'm going to have a variable here that's called state, and this is a Boolean variable. Now, Boolean variables can only have two values, either true or false. And you'll see how we're going to use this in a few minutes. But we're going to initialize this Boolean variable to true. Okay, now we have the setup. All right, now, first of all, we've got the push button switch on pin 2, so we're saying pin mode to input pull up. Okay, now here's where the interrupt is programmed in. We use this statement, attach interrupt, and then in parentheses, it actually takes three parameters here. In parentheses, the first parameter is the interrupt number. So this is either going to have to be a 0 or a 1, depending upon which port we've got we're using. So since we're using port 2, this is going to have to be interrupt 0. Okay, then following that is the interrupt service routine. Okay, I'm just going to call this ISR, or interrupt service routine. You could call it anything you want, but basically it's a function that is outside the loop here, and when the interrupt is generated, the processor is going to execute that routine. Okay, the third parameter here is either falling or rising. Now, basically the way this works is when there is a voltage at this pin, it's going to generate the interrupt. Now, either falling or rising tells the processor, do you want the interrupt to be generated when the voltage is falling from 5 volts back down to 0, or do you want it rising when it's going from 0 volts up to 5 volts? All right, in this case, it really doesn't matter. We could use either one, but we'll use falling here. All right, then the last statement is pin mode 7 output. Now that, if I could just move the code back here, that just is the port that this LED is connected to, port 7. Okay, now, here is the loop. Now, notice there is no digital read here. There's no read statement. When we press that button, it's going to generate the interrupt. All right, now, in the loop, there's only really one statement here. It's an if statement, and it says if state is true. Now, remember, state is that Boolean variable. So if state is true, then digital write 7, comma high. In other words, turn on that LED. Else, if state is false, turn it off. Okay, now, when we push the button here on the push button switch, it's going to generate the interrupt. And when it generates the interrupt service routine is going to be executed, which is this down here. Now, what this single statement does, it says state is equal to not state. Now remember, state is a Boolean variable. So what this does is it just flips it from true to false. If state is true, then the statement is going to flip it to false. If state is false, the statement is going to flip it back to true. That's all it does. All right, now I'd like to move this, if I could. Okay. All right, now I'm going to start simulation. Okay, start simulation. Notice the LED is on. That's because the loop is being executed here. I haven't pushed the switch down, so no interrupt has been generated. When I depress that switch, the LED goes off. Okay, why? Because I have generated an interrupt, and this interrupt service routine was executed, and it toggled the state variable, was initially true, toggled it to false. So now in the loop statement, we know that it says if state is true, turn it on, else if it's false, turn the LED off. Okay, I can toggle this again. Now the LED comes on again. Okay, I generated another interrupt, and as a result of that, it made this variable state go from false back to true, and now the LED comes back on again. And of course, I can continue to do this. Okay, this should help you out in the assignment that you have there, whereby you have to change the rate of flashing of an LED using interrupts.